Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with a highly anticipated video. I did a set of these videos back in 2021. I did not do one for 2022 unfortunately, but we are back for 2023 with the worst essays of the year. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, with especially how much I have been doing the animation analysis videos over the past year. I really wanted to do this video, and of course the best of as well, to kind of give my thoughts of the animations overall from this year and give you my top 5 worst animations of the year. Now, let's go ahead and go over some ground rules before we get started. If you guys are familiar with these videos from years past, you will be familiar with the rules, but we do have a couple of slight alterations, very slight. So let's go ahead and get into it here. Of course, to start us off, only Dokkan Fest LR, and unfeatured LR animations will be included in the video. I feel that it's not fair to compare them to free-to-play and other unfeatured units, because obviously those units are not the big boy premium units that of course is the reason why you're really using your dragon stones on these banners. So these guys are going to be kind of kept in a tier of their own, and to be honest with you, I'd probably do a whole video on free-to-play animations. I don't know, maybe I'll do that in the future. Not in the cards at the moment, but that would be interesting to do a top 5 on free-to-plays. Nonetheless, though, our second rule here is that we will be covering all types of animations in these 2 videos. That being super attacks, unit super attacks, active skills, transformations, standbys, etc. All of that good stuff. Obviously, when it comes to the modern day of Dokkan, there are so many different types of animations that I could honestly probably do a top 5 best and worst of like every single different type of Dokkan animation that we've gotten this year, right? That would be kind of crazy. Could you imagine like 20 videos in your sub box from me with every different type of animation as a top 5? I wish I had that much time in the day. Hyperbolic time chamber, please be invented so I can do that. Anyway. When it comes to the third rule, every card will only get 1 slot. This is obviously to kind of keep it fresh and make sure that we are, not given too many units, too many shenanigans going on for them, right? Obviously, with certain units, they could have a bunch of animations that I'm like, yuck, and half the list could end up being that unit. Or on the flip side, obviously, there could be a unit that I think all of their animations are fantastic, and then it's like the whole list ends up being 1 unit. So obviously, we're not going to go down that route for that sake of things. We are going to keep every slot to 1 unit. As well, this is obviously only animations from 2023 on JP. As that is the original release time for these units, I'm not going to be going by the global schedule or any technicality. I know sometimes people consider like the New Year's units to be units for the next year, but they always still come out in the previous year. If they did release in 2024, I would have included them in that list, but no, they came out in 2023, so they get included on that list. But of course, only on JP, because obviously, again, that is the, very first time that we got to lay our eyes on them, so that is the year that they are from. Number 5 is that obviously all of this is just my opinion. You are completely in your right to agree or disagree with me. Obviously, you can absolutely love some of these animations that are going to be on this list, or you can despise them as much as I do. Of course, obviously, with this just being my opinion, this is all just for fun, and it's just my thoughts on how I feel about these animations. So definitely, if your favorite animation is on this list, don't take it to heart or anything like that. And remember, just because I dislike it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. Don't let other people take away your enjoyment of something just because they don't like it. And when it comes to rule number 6, this is actually going to be something new. We are not going to be doing honorable mentions this time. If we look in years past, you can see that we did do honorable mentions in previous top 5s. And if you're wondering why we're not going to do them this year, well, let me take a look at my notes here. Oh, good Kami! That is a lot of units. Yeah, when doing both of these videos, I had a ton of stuff in the honorable mentions for the good and the bad. So, it would take up way too much time for me to cover all of these different honorable mentions. So I'll just leave my notes here on the screen, and you can kind of take with that what you will, because that could honestly be its own video that would probably be the length or exceed the length of this video. But that is going to do it for our rules. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and hop in to the worst of the worst of 2023. Coming in at number 5, we have Fizz LR Trunks' 18 key super attack. Now, to be honest with you, when it comes to this guy, I honestly could have just picked Vegeta's oversized hand to be the worst animation in this slot, but one thing out of this animation not being great does not obviously give it the spot on the list. No. The 18 key super attack was a super attack that when it dropped, I really disliked, it being my least favorite out of all of Trunks' animations. Not to mention, when this guy initially dropped, it was the first animation analysis video, I believe, that I ever gave the funny lowercase treatment to, because I really just disliked his animations that much. When it comes to this animation, I feel it's just really janky. There's a lot of jumps, there's a lot of pose changes that really kind of catch you off guard. I feel like some of the hits really don't have a lot of impact to them. I think it's just not helped by the fact either that Gohan was obviously such a fantastic set of animations. To see Trunks' look kind of janky like this really did not help his case. Not to mention, in this full animation, he looks kind of out of place, if that's the right thing to say. I'm not exactly sure if that's just because of the Sword of Hope aura that he has around him, or if it's because of something else. But when it comes to this animation, he kind of just feels like he's pasted in there almost. Like he's basically edited into the background. I'm not sure if it's just because the art style of Trunks feels like that it doesn't mesh well with everything else on the screen, or again, if it's because of the Sword of Hope aura, because obviously the way that this guy works is that his 12 and 18 key are the same, except when you activate his shenanigans, then he gets the aura for the Spirit Bomb aura around him. Not really sure what is the exact reason, but my eyes don't like looking at it. So we are going to move on from number 5. Coming in at number 4, we have the super attack animation for STR Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Now, I'm sure that some of you in the comments section below are already typing down there, huh? It's not the Dragon Fist? What? I can't believe it. And you would honestly be right to think that, because I kind of surprised myself when thinking over this animation. Yes, in terms of the Dragon Fist, I think for me personally, it is certainly the more disappointing animation. I don't think that there is any denying that fact. However, really the problem with this animation is the Dragon Fist itself, right? Most of the other things at play here are okay at best, in my opinion. When it comes to this beginning section with Super Saiyan 3 Goku, right, where he readies up the punch, I think that this section actually looks pretty cool. I think there's certainly some things that they could have done to improve it, right? It's not as good as it could be, but it doesn't make me physically ill. However, what follows does indeed make me physically ill. Obviously, the part where Goku throws his fist up for the actual Dragon Fist looks good, but this entire section here on out is painful to watch, with the dragon coming in as the static PNG from 2017 to having it quite literally just slide across the screen and just changing to have its mouth open to it quite literally just bonk right into the enemy with no real sense of impact. All of it is extremely disappointing. This part is okay in my opinion. I still feel like they could have done a little bit better with the dragon wrapping around the enemy. However, what is kind of ironic is that even though the ending is still good, with this section right here, the actual animation that exists is very nice. Of course, the part where Goku has his fist up in the air is not present in the animation, which is extremely disappointing, obviously. But with that being said, because it's not in the animation, I obviously can't really knock the animation for being bad, I suppose, but I can certainly knock it for not having it. However, with that all being said, since the only part that is really the most egregious, right, is the dragon, I kind of feel that if the dragon section was improved, and of course if the KO screen was there, but even if the dragon section was improved, this animation would not have gotten nearly as clowned on as it did by everybody seemingly in the community, myself included. And obviously the KO screen not being there is disappointing, but obviously it's not bad because, I mean, look at this dragon PNG, bro. You can't tell me they looked at this and thought this was good. I'm tripping up my words because I'm so angry about it. But with all of that being said, I am actually going to give this spot to the SA for Goku, because I think that this one is just more consistently bad when it comes to the animation overall. That's why I wanted to go over the Dragon Fist animation a little bit, because I still feel like there are parts of it that are good, or at least just alright, when I feel as though this entire SA is just not good. Obviously, the whole point of this was supposed to be referencing the Wrath of the Dragon movie poster, but in my opinion, it just feels a little bit weird to base an entire animation off of parts of a poster, because it's supposed to be animated and not, you know, stale images. And obviously there's a little bit of animation at play, but it's almost like if you turn the poster into a GIF for a promotional video. That's almost kind of what it seems like. It's like they made this SA just for the promo video that they could put on Twitter and on ads and stuff like that. It's very strange. But nonetheless, even Goku stanced up here, right, looks okay, but the minute that my boy goes to change his pose is just, oh. So we start off here, obviously, with the just jump cut to the orange background, which is very jarring for the viewer. This just confused me the first time I watched it. I thought that my video skipped ahead or something like that, or the animation was glitched or something. But no, it just skips ahead to the orange background. There's no transition to it. Goku bringing his arms back at first looks okay, but then of course you get to the point where there's this change, which is very jarring to see. And not to mention, Goku's face also just looks weird. Not to mention his anatomy on his side, I feel, kind of looks off. And then of course, when he's getting back into stance, you immediately have this shot of him then pulling his arms back, going from this to this. There's no way that they could not have included more frames in this section, because this is just way too big of a jump. And not to mention the style change and the shading change is just way too quick to happen. It makes you, again, feel like that you're just looking at a bunch of PNGs put together rather than a nice animated scene. You know, it kind of takes you out of the immersion, so to speak. And obviously that is what it is. It's a bunch of PNGs put together, but a good Dokkan animation makes you feel like you're watching the scene, not a Dokkan animation with a bunch of PNGs sliding together. Now, with that being said, this entire section of Goku transforming, the individual parts are okay, right? The animation during all of Goku's transformations here are just alright. Even towards the end of them, it's weird because they start moving and then they pause for a moment before actually going into the next transition, when you would think that, oh, they would want to have it moving fluidly. So it would be like as he's throwing the Kamehameha forward, he's transforming mid-throw. But it kind of looks like Goku's doing a fashion show here. He moves and then pauses. And then he moves and then pauses again, right? Again, it feels very promotional video-esque rather than a actual Dokkan Battle super attack, right? With that being said, when we finally get to the Super Saiyan 3, this part is cool, but the animation feels extremely basic for Goku's arms moving. Again, it feels almost like a fan animation type of thing where somebody's just learning how to use the assets to kind of, you know, make them mesh together like this. And not to mention, it just feels very stale in the way that it moves. It doesn't feel very dynamic, and it doesn't feel very lifelike. It almost feels like an animatronic sort of thing. The blue is cool on the effect of the Kamehameha, but the real egregious part is after it fires off, we get one of the worst Kamehamehas that I have ever seen in modern time. This is just abysmal. This is just disgraceful, quite frankly. If I made this animation in the modern year of 2023, I would feel disgusted with myself, quite frankly, because this is just such a weak animation, right? Having this shot from Goku in the back with just basically throwing effects on screen, not to mention the Kamehameha not really feeling lifelike at all, with it basically just moving forward as a static line, you know, having it just kind of jiggle a little bit. It all just feels very, very underwhelming in my opinion. And not to mention, even the explosion at the end is cool, but it kind of doesn't make sense for the explosion to be blue. You would think it would just be normal explosion color, but I guess obviously it's supposed to be the Kamehameha energy. It still feels a little bit off, because even when I see characters shoot off energy blasts, the explosion is not the color of the energy blast, even when it's just clashing against an enemy in other Dokkan animations. So it feels a little bit off-putting. With all of that being said, I can confidently say that Goku belongs at the number 4 spot. Just feeling very janky, very static, not dynamic enough, and overall just extremely disappointing on top of it all. Somehow beating out my absolute number 1 enemy, the Dragon Fist animation for number 4. How could I have more hate in my heart after one of my least favorite fumbles of the year? Well, ladies and gentlemen, number 3 comes in to show us how it's done. We have the 12 key for the AGL LR Goku, aka the Dragon Soul Z Fighters LR. When it comes to this guy's animations, I kind of feel as though most of his animations could honestly be put at the list. I think that realistically, the beginning of the intro animation is honestly the best part about this unit, which is kind of ironic, I suppose, that the unit peaks right in the beginning. Even this part where all the Z Fighters pull up still feels a little bit janky to me. But with all of that being said, I just feel like the most of this unit's animations feel very janky. They don't feel very fluid. They feel kind of slapped together. And it's a real shame, because obviously this guy is just a huge reference to Dragon Ball Kai, which I actually grew up as a kid watching. And it's kind of funny, because when it comes to these animations, despite me really thinking that they don't look that good in terms of a animation perspective, I still enjoy looking at these for the spectacle of it, because of obviously the childhood memories that are being presented in front of me. But when it comes to the animation that is the worst out of all of them, from a technical perspective, we got the boy, the 12 key super, which is a real disappointment, because obviously this is just a huge big reference to the opening of Kai. However, I feel like there are a lot of frames missing from this animation. From this section here where Goku begins to square up, this just feels super off to me, where you have the introduction part of the scene, Goku obviously getting into fighting stance. However, it feels to me as though when he finally becomes grounded with both feet on the ground, it just feels a little bit jarring going from this pose to this. Again, with this type of animation, you could kind of think of this as like, oh, he's just moving really quickly, and obviously it's supposed to be like impactful, but it really doesn't feel impactful to me, and personally, I think it just feels a little bit janky in motion. Now, that's not the worst of it though, at least with this part right here, where Goku then puts his arms out. That feels a little bit more like what I was describing, Goku getting into fighting pose super quickly to ready himself for battle. But when it comes to what comes after the card art, that is really where things take a turn for the worst. Goku flying in feels a little bit weird already, but it's not too bad, right? I think it's just kind of the way that they change the angle like this, rather than having it be a little bit of rotoscoping or something like that. It is the background basically not changing the angle. They try and change it so that it kind of tricks your eyes a little bit, but it sort of feels like things are in the exact same position and Goku has just moved immediately like this. It doesn't help that Vegeta's sprite basically just looks like it's moving right, and obviously he hasn't really changed the position that he's in. And of course, with Goku flying forward, you then change to this position here, which again, the background does not change enough to really imply that the camera has changed to looking at this angle, although at least Vegeta, I suppose, is in the correct position now. And I do quite like this asset of Goku, actually, and the punch, I feel like, is pretty cool and nicely well done, but it really feels like this animation is super cut up, and I'm assuming that the reason why that is because, of course, since this is based off of the intro, obviously a intro for an anime is supposed to be poppy, flashy. You're cutting from all these different scenes. You're cutting from the original animation that's a part of the OP, right? And for Dokkan's sake, it doesn't really lend itself well to a Dokkan animation because these attacks should feel fluid. It should feel like the character is going from one move to the next, right, in coherence, rather than just jump cutting to the next thing, which is exactly what happens here. It's so jarring going from Goku with his fist out to, oh, he's standing up now. Okay, very, very weird. And not to mention, I think this is supposed to be Goku landing here when you see he kind of goes thunk. But it quite literally looks like if an action figure was posed in a specific pose and you just set them down at your desk. That's the best way that I can describe the way that this looks, right? Going from here to here like this. It's just very off-putting, to say the least. And, oh boy, man. Oh boy, man. When we finally get to this section here, which is, of course, Goku doing all of these different fighting poses, right? First of all, this is already a little bit jarring, and again, you could definitely equate this to the type of thing where, oh, he's changing poses quickly, but they don't do a good job of implying that if that's what they're trying to do, and again, it really just feels like cutting corners here. When we then have this with the obvious, pretty cool, I suppose, impact frame, it is a little bit, like, simplistic, but I suppose it works, though still, what it kind of then transitions into is kind of jarring, because I don't really feel like that the pose that Goku has here is going into a kick, but I guess he is readying his foot. Nonetheless, though, I think what's more jarring is it's so close up and then it's so far away. That is what really makes this feel very off to me. And Goku's next motion here, oh, whoa, the horror, what is that, bro? Oh my gosh, you're telling me they looked at that step and thought that that was okay? This looks like when you're just dashing around in a 2D fighting game, right? When you're literally just flicking the stick back and forth. That is exactly what this animation looks like when it comes to Goku's movement forward. It kind of reminds me of Quap almost, if you're familiar with that old Flash game. That's kind of what this looks like. The exact angle and sort of the way that Goku moves his body awkwardly, super statically, not enough dynamic motion to it for sure. And not to mention, right, with the actual punch, quote unquote, it is literally just Vegeta standing there and Goku's fist is just out in front of him. Goku just walks forward and then it just bonks against Vegeta. Like, you're telling me that's supposed to be a punch? Like, I don't know. It's just so incredibly jank and frankly awful. It's just bad. Like, there's nothing good to say about it. And then another animation that makes me physically ill is what I was about to say. With this animation having Goku walking forward like this, it's just so incredibly bad. Then we do have Goku swing around with his leg, which again, at least they try and animate it a little bit better, but it is very jarring going from this like kind of Goku asset here, right? To then having him already be turned around, by the way. This looks super awkward because it's like, oh, Goku's ducking his head down, right? And moving his arms there. But no, this is supposed to be Goku has already spun all the way around. They need way more frames in between that to have that implication be the way that it should. And when they finally go to this, Goku, again, has already turned around, right? I feel like they almost should have just removed this in-between one, which wouldn't make sense because obviously he spins in the scene. But it might make more sense going from this, where Goku's fist is out, to this shot right here. Because at least then it would be a similar angle and it would be Goku moving back. I know it wouldn't be, you know, anime accurate, but this animation is not anime accurate in the first place. So I don't know if it really matters, man. And with this high quality asset being here, I like it, but it's very, very jarring going from the lower quality asset that was right before. Not to mention, this is just a PNG of Goku, right? Literally just a PNG. His hair does move a slight bit, right? But still, it's basically just the PNG of the man before then transitioning into this one, which again, with another consistent theme with all these animations in this guy's kit is that they're not really impactful because the character is moving into them. It's like they just have them change the asset, throw a couple effects on screen, and then zoom it in and out. It does not feel like an impactful punch whatsoever. And we have another very jarring jump cut here, right? Because you would think if we were going from this to this, Goku would have his arm out like that. But no, now he's in a neutral position. And not to mention, also not on the ground now. And it's still just very jarring going from this to this. With Vegeta flying up in the air, you have Goku fly up, which looks okay at best. I still think it looks a little bit janky personally. But we then have this section where Goku is zoomed in, which does look pretty cool. And obviously the camera flying past for the kick, which does look, albeit okay, right? But unfortunately, it looks extremely jarring because of the stinky sprite, ladies and gentlemen. Look at how big that sprite is compared to how Goku should be. Goku is basically kicking like Great Ape Vegeta, except he's not an ape. Look how big Vegeta is compared to him. It's so incredibly jarring. Stinky sprite moment, for real, for real. But with all that being said, it basically just ends in an explosion, which also doesn't really make sense. I know it's just supposed to be taking references from the OP, but like, why does his kick make it turn into a spirit bomb explosion with destroying the ground, right? It's such a shame because I really like the concept of both Gohan and Goku, but I feel like it's just so poorly executed on the boy, which is a real shame because I am definitely a Dragon Ball Kai fan. You know, obviously having grown up with it, I really appreciate it for basically introducing it to me in the first place, right? But with that being said, this man lands himself in the number 3 spot. Number 2 is sort of ironic because this is probably the animation that many people expected to be at number 1, considering this is easily the unit that I have clowned on the most this year in seemingly all of my animation analysis videos that are mostly negative about a unit. I feel like I usually bring up this particular animation right here, this character in general, that being AGL Kale. That is right. When it comes to Kale's animations, this is another unit that I feel like is kind of just not that great overall, right? When we're talking about her full set of everything that she has going on in the animation department, I am definitely not a fan. From the super attack of the untransformed version to the super attack of the transformed version, it's just not it for me. I think at the bare minimum, at least this animation here with Kale's transformation is alright. It's nothing too crazy in my book, but it gets the job done and it doesn't make me sick as the 12 key does for the untransformed one. I think that the transformed one could possibly also go into this slot. Hello Frost, shout out to the boy Dandre. Because it's also not great, to be 100% honest with you. There's a lot of things in that 18 key super that I feel like are just super janky and very, you know, static poses, a little bit of like, ooh, why does it look like that type beat. But for my money, I am going to give it to the 12 key super attack for Kale. Oh man, this is easily the animation that has come to mind every time I think about stinky Dokkan animations. And it's a little bit unfortunate because I know this unit isn't extremely favored by the community either. When it comes to Kale's walking animation in the beginning here, it is not that great. it feels just a little bit too jarring for my taste. It doesn't really feel like she's walking forward. It really just kind of looks like, to me, a bunch of assets that they put together to kind of make it look like she's supposed to be walking forward. And especially in this part here where they have this full body shot, it kind of looks like she's walking on air, right? It doesn't really look like she's actually walking, because they just kind of have her float forward basically and have her constantly moving as she's walking. They don't have her pause with the step that she's taking. She's just basically walking on air, like that one TFS bit where Piccolo is commenting on the minions walking on the air. I feel like that's exactly what I'm doing here when it comes to this particular animation. It just feels very off-putting to me. Of course, with that being said, we then move on to at least a little bit better of a cut of animation, but it is still basically just 3 PNGs at play here when it comes to the more higher quality assets that Kale has for the section right after the card art, right? We have the smirking face for Kale, right, which they basically just kind of zoom in on a little bit. And then they move to this asset, which you can see the quality change by the quality of the actual lines around her eyes and her eyebrows and the hair and whatnot, right? Moving from that one to then basically just going from her mouth opening to then having this one where she is bringing her fist back. At least this part is okay, but it still feels like there's a ton of frames that could have been in here. Not to mention this part here where it goes from this to this, right? Definitely should have been a little bit of a better transition between that. And they basically just zoom in on this PNG, right? I think when it comes to modern animations, there is no excuse that Dokkan has to be having just these, you know, zoom ins and static PNGs, you know, zipping around the screen. That is something from Dokkan past that should stay in the past. Obviously, when the technology was there to just have that be the case, then that was fine. But in the modern day, we expect more from these Dokkan animations, and we know they can do more because they make enough money to do more. Now, we have Kale's fist charge at the screen, right? Which is okay. Again, this is kind of a cool angle because it's supposed to be like it's flying from Kale's face to the fist. However, they don't travel down her arm. It is just a jump cut from her face to her arm, which is extremely lackluster and disappointing. Oh boy. Here we go. The thing of my nightmares. I'll just let it play out. I'll just let it play out for you a little bit. It hurts to watch. I'm not gonna lie to you. It really hurts to watch. At least they kind of try and buff it with this section here, but then transitioning into this, how did they make it worse from that entourage of punches before? Oh my gosh, it's disgusting. Oh man, so this entire section right here where Kale is punching and kicking is not impactful whatsoever. They do not use high quality assets here. They look basically more like animated versions of the sprites. The movement looks very jank, which, to be fair, Kale is kind of going ballistic here, but it still just does not feel animated very well. It feels like that one filler episode of the anime where they got the B team to animate it. That's what this section of the animation really screams to me. With that being said, at least the transition into the little bit of good animation before the more pain and suffering comes on the screen is good. You have the section here, right, where obviously Kale is still kind of in her basically Dokkan sprite form, but they do a good job of transitioning, bringing her, you know, down here, right, to obviously then it being a little bit more high quality asset, with her then standing up and then blasting. Now, I still feel like even the stand-up animation could use a little bit of work. It still feels a little bit janky to me, and there's a bunch of like spots in here where the poses just rapidly change. It kind of feels like, you know, the poses are basically going, instead of being one fluid animation, it's a, like, I could describe it as like a gear, right? That's kind of what it feels like to me, with a gear like clicking, right? It doesn't really feel like it's fluid, like a circle spinning or something like that, right? It goes click, 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 right? To basically get to the end of the animation. But we then get to this part. Oh man, so at least the transition, I suppose, is pretty cool with the explosion, right? And then the green on the screen. Hey, that's a little bit of a pun for you there. And of course, then Kale's hand coming in, right, with the smoke dissipating. But we then cut to the worst thing that I have potentially laid my eyes on, which I guess isn't true because there's still another unit after this. But oh my gosh! You're telling me in the good Lord's year of 2023, this was the best they could do? Come on, man. This looks terrible. Absolutely horrendous. They try and spice it up with some rocks breaking, but it still just isn't good. And not to mention, when they finally transition to this part, they don't even bother animating Kale actually lifting him up, right? Obviously, this is supposed to be she's flying and dragging Goku on the ground. Honestly, this is disrespectful, Goku. I would not take this level of disrespect being a part of such a stinky essay getting rolled like this, personally. We have Kale just basically twist. They went into Photoshop and they just rotated the PNG, right? They did not have Kale move at all here. No. They just twisted this funny PNG and then cut to the next section of animation here and thought that we wouldn't notice. They really thought we wouldn't notice. Who do they think we are? So you have Kale squish a little bit, which is, you can see, right? She kind of is moving a little bit. Are my eyes just playing tricks on me? My eyes may just be playing tricks on me. I think I'm just so enraged that I'm starting to see things, man. We have, regardless, though, him getting lifted up by Kale's hand, right? Obviously, Goku getting lifted. And again, just another cut here to this part where he's now hoisted before then another jump, right, of the poses, where we have Kale basically just go from here to here, to then obviously her finally blasting Goku. Again, super janky all throughout, right? A bunch of different pose changes, and not to mention just getting thrown into the rock there with not a lot of follow-up to this animation. It doesn't really feel impactful in the way that he gets blasted away or thrown. It's just kind of like, eh. You know, that's the sound that I feel like is being made when Kale throws him. It's just, eh. And they follow it up with a, unfortunately, Gohan Beast-esque KO screen here, right? Where Gohan Beast's was just a static PNG. With Kale's, at least, they have the background move a little bit with the smoke and the sky, but it is still basically just a zoom in on a static PNG of Kale. You're telling me they couldn't have done something more interesting than just having her sit there looking like a dingus on the screen? Yeah, this animation is definitely not good. This may be the animation that I have the most personal beef with in terms of this year of animations, but it is certainly not the animation that I think is the worst by any means, and it's certainly not the animation that makes me the most sad. So we are going to get there now. The Big Kahuna #1. The worst of the worst. The stinkiest of the stinkiest. My least favorite animation of 2023 Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle is the 12 key animation for Super Saiyan Blue AGL LR Vegito. That is right. This animation hurts me on a physical level, nay, to my very core, nay, to my very soul. When I look at this animation keeps me up at night crying with how absolutely disgusting it is. I know for probably a lot of people, this slot maybe should have gone to, or at least another slot that this particular unit would have been in on this list, should have potentially gone to the intro animation. And I cannot deny that this animation not only has achieved meme status because of how bad it is, and not to mention, obviously, just the, funny memes that have surrounded this unit. I know that a lot of people, even to this day, I just see random tweets on the timeline with people talking about, oh my gosh, dude, that intro is so stinky. And I agree with you. It is not a good animation by any stretch. But when we have animations like this at play, this is what really grinds my gears. Let's go ahead and take a look. So, of course, we start off with Vegito floating here, at least to start us off, before they get us into the pain and suffering. We get a little bit of rotoscoping here for our troubles, okay? We get the boy kind of twisting a little bit, which is pretty cool, right? With him obviously stanced up against the enemy here. Now, what do I even say? How do I articulate to you how terrible this is? How do I use words that are in the English language that would be powerful enough to describe the emotions that this invokes in me? You're telling me that they cut from this dope shot of Vegito stanced up, ready to take on any foe, Zamasu, the fusion of Goku Black and Zamasu, to cutting to his foot already being on screen with this PNG flying in, right? No movement, static PNG. Trust me, I checked. I looked at those asset sheets. I went over them with a fine-tooth comb because the first time I saw this, I said, there ain't no way. There ain't no way that this is the animation that they went with for the 12th key. They have him zoom in. And not to mention, right, the way that they just kind of try and imply that he's moving fast, these little speed lines in the background, and they blur the background, and it does a terrible job of it. Other animations do it so much better. And they have Vegito pause. They just have him pause midair. He just doesn't move. And then it just kind of collides into the enemy. They just cut it to the foot hitting the enemy. This is like the same type of thing as Kai Goku earlier on this list when he does the, you know, the Street Fighter, the Mortal Kombat slide into, you know, basically just bonking into the enemy with his fist already outstretched. That's what this feels like for Vegito. At least, I suppose, he has a little animation of the zoom in of his foot here, but all this is doing is just kind of moving this around in a circle with his foot collided with the enemy, right? It's not that impactful. And not to mention, the follow-up is what really ruins it. Like, I feel like it would not hurt me as much if they just ended the kick part here, right? And I talk about how I hate when they do cuts like this, where they just cut to a completely another scene. Again, Kai Goku, right? Did the same thing. But I think that would have hurt my soul less than the end section here. Vegito's foot planted into Zamasu. And he just kind of shoves him away. That was the best they could do? That was what they were cooking? Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? At least they bothered to animate his foot trying to push him away, but it doesn't really make sense. Vegito's still basically in the same spot. They have his knee crunch a little bit to try and imply it, and it also still looks jank because, of course, Zamasu is basically still in the same place, right? Zamasu doesn't move either. He ain't helping this situation either. They have him basically just crunch his leg, and then basically just like a slinky, they have that man's leg going, pop goes the weasel, to shove the enemy away. And not to mention, what is going on with Vegito's foot here? That is not the way that feet that are healthy and don't have broken bones bend. That is not correct. This is just off-putting, frankly. This looks like when I take one of my figures and adjust the foot a little bit too far to the left. It just doesn't look good. It looks like his foot is broken from this angle. And when the enemy flies off, it's way too late, right? They should have had him already been cooking, basically, flying away moments before. But no, they choose to have him kind of sit there for a minute when he already has his foot out, right? I don't know if it's supposed to imply that it's like, oh, what an impactful kick, and, you know, oh, it takes a minute for the attack to activate. No, it looks bad. He just sits there for a minute as the foot is just implanted into him. It doesn't make any sense. And not to mention, with Vegito just sitting there, it doesn't help with how fast Zamasu flies away. You would think this would be like a little shove backwards, right? Where Zamasu would kind of slide back a little bit and then pause. But no, that boy goes flying. He's going crazy. He's flying into the stratosphere. And we're not even like 10 seconds into this animation and I'm already this angry. This is awful. So we have Zamasu fly away. And we have Vegito teleport up above him, right? Again, these motion lines do not cut it in my opinion. This looks way too thick when it comes to how these motion lines should be. They don't look like they're in the background. And they don't look very anime-esque. It kind of looks like putting a filter that you can find on a editing program, right? Like your Adobe Premiere effects that are just the generic standard effects, like the little anime fire transition that you see on like every anime YouTube video. It kind of reminds me of that sort of thing, right? It's just super generic looking and it feels very out of place. It kind of feels like it was edited onto the essay as an afterthought. I honestly wish that the kick would have just been alone, to be 100% honest with you, because I feel like the kick is just okay, right? It's not too crazy, but it is a little bit weird, I will say, that from the angle that Vegito kicks him, it's almost like he's using the inside of his knee rather than like his actual foot to kick him down, right? And maybe that's just because of a Stinky Sprite moment here, but it just looks really weird. Like, it looks like he's resting his leg on Zamasu's waist, basically. It's just very jarring. You then have Zamasu fly down towards the ground, where you have Vegito kick him back up. I suppose, at least for this animation, again, right, they do have a little bit of minimal movement here where Vegito is winding up, but the kick definitely feels a little bit too impromptu to me. I know this is a case where this could definitely be, oh, he's obviously moving his leg super quickly and kicking up, because obviously it's impactful like that, but with that being said, I still feel like it looks a little bit jank. And with Vegito teleporting in, personally, I think that this turn does not look good whatsoever, right? There are units where they do a turnaround like this, and it looks really good and super fluid. I still think it looks a little bit too janky. It's certainly better than Goku's 3, right? But it is definitely a little bit too janky for my opinion, right? It's kind of weird, too, just the angle they have him at, because it's like he's turning in, but then they just kind of have him, like, looking under his armpit. I don't know. It's just a little bit of a weird one. Then, though, the real problem here is the kick, right? The kick out feels really jarring with how big Vegito himself gets. And not to mention another certified Stinky Sprite moment for ya. Look at how big Zamasu gets. Not only does this not make sense from the size that Zamasu is here, right, transitioning into this size, but obviously Zamasu is, you know, not this big in comparison to Vegito here, right? Like, he ain't giant. So why does he look that big? It's just super jarring going from this to this. And not to mention, keep in mind, when I'm talking about these things, it's not just, obviously, Zamasu, it's every sprite in the game is going to operate like this, because they're just using the same poses for, you know, all of these different sprite sheets for all the different characters that have the poses that look like this. So the character will just grow really big for no reason. Now here, you would think, with that kick in the beginning, of the enemy character flying away, you would think they'd be flying sky high. You think they'd be going to Kingdom Come, okay? But no. They just kind of have Vegito move around a little bit as a PNG once again, right? They just kind of have my man do a little shimmy shim, you know? No animation on him. No nothing. They just kind of have him move around a little bit. You know, boys having a good time, I guess. You know, he's dancing to the music. And then they have Vegito bring his leg down. But hold on a second. Why is Zamasu still here? You're telling me that boy didn't go flying into the stratosphere from that kick? He just stays in place? It's so weird, because obviously there's some punches and kicks in anime where one punch will send a character flying, but the other will kind of keep them in the place that they're in. And maybe this is supposed to be like that, but from the angle and what they've established up until this point in this animation, no. It ain't working like that. And not to mention, at the point that Zamasu's sprite then goes into the I've been hit sprite, it is still extremely jarring because Vegito hasn't lowered his foot yet, and now it just looks like Vegito is bigger than Zamasu and he like shrunk from his giant form. this is just so all over the place. You finally have Vegito bring his leg down, and you just sort of have Zamasu floating here like, you know, life could be dreamed for the boy, right? It looks like he's conked out there, taking a couple of Z's. And you then have Vegito now beginning to mollywop him. And this cut is so weird. Because you would think like, oh, okay, they're so close up, right? They could easily have a couple of assets of him, you know, obviously bringing his leg up and his other leg back, right? To then lead into the kick, or, you know, obviously like when they do a lot of these transitions where they make the background blurry, right? And moving like this, they try and transition into it by having either like, you know, a color come through the background, or, you know, they have it fade into the motions lines, or the motion lines fade into the scene. But no, it just kind of happens. And not to mention, before we even talk about Vegito's kick, seemingly the background is supposed to imply that Vegito is moving forward. But that is not the case whatsoever. It just looks like he is in the exact same place, just kicking Zamasu and basically moving him around with his foot. It does not look like that they are moving at all. That's what this is supposed to be implying. And it also doesn't really make sense for them to be doing that right after this. It's like, oh, okay, they just kick it into high gear out of nowhere, right? It would have made more sense for Vegito to kick him away and then, you know, come up and start kicking him a bunch mid-flight. But no, he just stops and then they start moving. It just doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, the actual animation on Vegito here is hot dog water. This is okay in terms of his body movement, I suppose. But when it comes to his leg, they basically have 3 frames of him going dot, 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 dot. It just doesn't look good. It looks super janky. It kind of just looks like he's dragging him around, right? Very, very weird here. It kind of reminds me of like lights or like a pinball machine. I don't know. I don't even really know how to describe what this looks like to me. It's kind of like those old things where they tried to animate a character like dancing or moving on like, you know, a light board or a light fixture or something, but they only had like 3 sections of it, so the character would like jump and then return to the beginning. I know that's a very obscure comparison, but that's the best that I can describe for the way that this, you know, kind of looks to me. And not to mention, right, arguably the only good part about this essay, the close-up of Vegito, it's very jarring going from this, right, with him kicking a bunch, to then immediately just cutting to him being zoomed in, right? And albeit, obviously when it is revealed that he is still right in front of him, and the whole point is that he's given one extra kick to finally bop him, right? It makes sense from that perspective, but it's still extremely jarring cutting from, you know, this to this, and I still feel like they could have at least had a better transition in between. With that being said, Vegito here does look pretty cool with this shot of obviously him winding up the kick. However, I did always feel like this face looked a little bit weird, like his eyes are too long or something like that. It just feels a little bit off to me. I do like this little shot though of him obviously moving in and then, right, kind of moving back. And it's weird because you would think that if they were going to transition between these 2 poses, right, which again, this to this is incredibly jank, why would they have not done it up here, right, when his face is basically off camera? That would have been the perfect opportunity for that to be the case. And also, when it comes to Vegito's anatomy here as well, I'm no expert on the topic, but it feels a little bit off, right? With the way that obviously Vegito's pecs are here, this kind of makes sense to have the deep cut here, but it still feels like this one, which would be the right one, is like overlapping the left one. And not to mention this, the V cut of the orange shirt, which you would think would be lined up with the V cut of the blue, is off to the side here. And even if they weren't exactly aligned, it would still be closer in the middle. It's just very, very strange overall. I guess it's supposed to just be like the extra corner here because this has it, but this side looks a little bit of a deeper cut to me. And even here, it still looks a little bit jarring. But when we finally get this section, right, it is basically just this static PNG once again of Vegito zooming out, right, to then be here for the kick. Again, these PNGs should not be present, just a static thing on the screen like this, unless that is exactly how it looks in the anime. It just should not be present for a 2023 animation. You do have Vegito's kick obviously glowing, and I will say, it is kind of weird because this, I suppose, implies that he kicked his foot back, which I guess makes sense, but you don't see it, so it's still a little bit jarring. But then, even when Vegito's bringing his foot forward a little bit, right, you would think that the beam would then go from behind him, but obviously it doesn't. It's still in the same position as if he whipped it back, but now he's whipping it forward and the beam is still there, so it just really doesn't make a lot of sense. You then have him obviously kick the blast against Zamasu, with it finally kicking away. And again here, this just does not feel very impactful to me personally, right? Having it basically just cut from this to this, right? I wish there would have been a little bit more in between, or a little bit more oomph, I think is the best way to describe it. You then have the blast obviously fly down towards the ground, and I wish the pain would stop, but there's still more. Why is there still more? Why did they feel the need to continue? They could have just ended my suffering there. That would have been a fine ending to this dog water 12 key super attack, but no, they felt the need to punish me more. We have this section now, where Vegito brings his arms forward here, right? Looking like a little birdie up in this section, honestly. But again, basically just a static PNG with the arms moving. You would think that there would be some change in facial expression on this part when he's bringing his arms forward to then form the attack, but no, there is no change in the facial expression, making this feel very jarring. It's almost like they just forgot to change the asset on his face, or it's like when you're playing with an action figure and the face is just the same the whole time. It's just very weird why they didn't animate his face actually emoting for this section. But with the arms then flying forward, we then get to the pain and suffering. At least the lighting looks pretty good, but the actual attack is literally just, you know, Vegito stands up here. The energy effect at least looks cool, but Vegito is quite literally just a PNG. This looks like a Dokkan animation from years ago. I'd say some of Tech Blue Vegito's animations look better than this, and even that had some of those funny PNGs. This would be something that I would almost expect to see in that when it comes to the way the Vegito is just, you know, a static PNG shaking there. And of course, we finally get the card art on the screen to end it off with, again, PNG Vegito just standing there, right, with the blast then finishing off the enemy. Again, at least the blast looks good and the lighting effects look good, but it is just static PNG Vegito. His hair, as far as I can see, right, in both of these shots, is not even moving. And that is such a simple thing that even some of the most stinky Dokkan animations do. Even Kale, in some of those sections that I wanted to throw up watching, they at least have her hair swaying in the wind a little bit. But no, here, none of those little nitty-gritty details, none of that nice minimal movement is at play. It's just all nonsense, disgusting, trash. That, for me, personally, is easily the worst animation of the year. And I think that all of this is not helped by the fact that this 12-key animation is followed by the Vegito Special, the 18-key, one of the best animations of the year. Right? You're telling me that that insane, crazy animation, loved by all, is a part of the same kit as this buffoon? I refuse to believe it. Get it off my screen now! Thank you all so much for watching this year's top 5 worst of 2023 video. I really appreciate all of your guys' love and support throughout this year. Doing these animation analysis videos has been an absolute blast, doing these all throughout 2023. And honestly, it is my favorite type of video to make. I really enjoy it. And not to mention, it seems like you guys do too. It's always super cool seeing all of your comments and everything like that. All of your support is really appreciated. And not to mention, when it comes to this channel, right, we have been growing slowly but steadily. And honestly, for me, it's really nice seeing that people tune in every single video, seemingly, even if it is some stinky animations, to see me talk about them every single time. So thank you guys so much for your patronage. I really, really appreciate it. Also, speaking of patronage, channel memberships are now open. I kind of realized that I could have had that this entire channel, honestly, but if you want to throw your boy a channel membership and support, would be much appreciated. But I just want to mention the option since it is now a thing. But coming up next will be the best of 2023. Thank you guys for your patience on these videos, and I will see you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.